Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. It's good to see you here. My name is John Engelhardt. I'm originally from Southwest Wisconsin, over near Prairie du Chien, or the Iowa Riviera, as we like to call it over there. But I've been in Madison for 20 years. I can see Monona from my backyard. It's right on the other side of the chain link fence. And I met Wally Brinkman in May or June when I went to a United to Amend meeting. I went to that meeting personally because I saw the amount of money that was entering our political system. There are some issues that are very important to me, and I just came to the realization that none of them are going to be addressed until we take the money out of our politics. So thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. I'd like to say that United to Amend, Wisconsin United to Amend, is not a political organization, right? We're nonpartisan in that we have Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Greens, Libertarians. It's going to take us all because this is an American problem. It's not a political or partisan problem at all. So let's step through our agenda here. We're going to talk about money in politics, how we got here, how we're going to try to fix it, and then we'll have some questions, and then the most important part is organizing should we decide to take signatures for a referendum. So this sign pretty much sums it up. Now, how are our politicians supposed to represent us when they're being paid by millionaires, corporations, special interests to represent them? Right? It's a rhetorical question, I'm pretty sure. And the answer is they're not, I think, in a large part. So we can't just paper over this problem with more legislation like McCain-Feingold. We're past that. We're entering a point where we may end up with a constitutional crisis. It's gone on so long, and there's really no end in sight. So what we've created for ourselves after a series of Supreme Court decisions that I'll cover is a system of legal bribery, right? Where our politicians, the politician with the most money, or the candidate with the most money wins 94% of the time, right? It's all about money now. And our elected officials are spending about 70% of their time raising money for the next election. I don't know where they're finding the time to legislate properly, and maybe they're not, because they've got to go out and make money to get reelected. It's a vicious cycle. And large donors, these folks that are paying these millions of dollars, have their own agenda. They don't care necessarily what we, the people, care about on a daily basis. They're representing corporations or special interests, and their interests, not ours. Our founding fathers had an experience pretty early with a corporation. It was the East India Company, right? And so that was part of the revolution. The East India Company ended up with all their tea in Boston Harbor, right? So there's a history here of us with corporations. Our founding fathers had a healthy distrust for them, right? They didn't hate them, they just had a distrust, and they made sure that they gave we, the people, the rights so that we could grant privileges to those corporations. And since over the last many years, that's been going wrong. So I'm going to touch on those. So we're not anti-corporation. Corporations are necessary. I work for a very large one myself, but I don't want the board of directors of my company setting public policy, right? That doesn't make any sense. That corporation, the one I work for, and other corporations, are beholden to their stakeholders, their shareholders. Doesn't necessarily line up with what we want as citizens and as we the people. So it started out 130 years ago with old Bancroft Davis, right? So Bancroft Davis was a former president of a railroad, and at that time the railroad companies were really the big companies in the United States. They were the Googles and the IBMs and the Microsofts, right, of their era. They controlled a lot. So Bancroft Davis, after his career, I guess, as a president of a large railroad, became a court reporter. Maybe this was the, I don't know how that worked in his career path, but maybe it was, a real good example of what not to do, right, in your career. So he in a mundane tax case, he included in the margins of this ruling verbiage that gave corporations equal protection under the law. So they took the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, equal protection, and he gave it to corporations. So he's the great uncle of all the corporations in our country. He gave them personhood. Absolutely unbelievable. And that's what started this big ball rolling down a hill. Along came Buckley versus Vallejo just in time for the bicentennial. And the Supreme Court ruled that money is the equivalent of free speech. So those corporations that were people now could spend their money, right, to affect public policy. There was a caveat in that law that McCain-Feingold took advantage of that said if there was any resemblance, there could be restrictions to prevent corruption. But when the Citizens United ruling came out, it smashed McCain-Feingold. And the corporations, you can read it for yourself, does not give rise to corruption or even the appearance of corruption. Yeah, I think we all might disagree with the statement of the Supreme Court. Here's Justice Stevens. In his dissent, he said corporations have no conscience, no feelings, no thoughts. They don't pass the belly button test, right? He also went on to say that this ruling could undermine the integrity of our elected institutions. If you look at the confidence in the Congress, you can see that maybe Justice Stevens was on the right track. About then, I was approached by somebody, I believe, at the Williamson Street Fair with a clipboard, and they said, "You want to take the money out of politics?" And I ripped that clipboard out of their hand and I signed my name there as quick as I could. And I remember voting on this in the city of Madison in April of 11. I felt pretty good about it and then just went on with my life for about 4 years and didn't do much. I think this election cycle has woken me back up to the problem of money in our politics. It's prevalent. So I joined this movement, met Wally, and since I live next to Monona, I volunteered to help her in her efforts, and we've met some great folks along the way, and I hope that we can all work together to make this better. So let's take a look at the money real quick. This is election cycle spending. Pretty boring chart. You'll notice that during midterm years, the spending drops a little bit until 2010, where it was a little bit higher than the presidential election year. And in 12, boom, blew up 3 times, right? So we're in a brave new world. You know, this thing does not scale in the right direction, and certainly in my opinion. We're guilty on both sides. Both sides are spending a ton of money. That's for sure. It's not a partisan issue. This is an American issue. It's one of those issues you can bring up at Thanksgiving and not have to worry about it because everybody's going to pretty much agree with you. There's too much money in our politics. So what you're looking at here on the left in green, the very large slice is you and I, the folks that give under $200, right, to a political campaign. The very narrow sliver there, the 2.6 or 0.26%, those are the folks that gave over $200. If you move over to the right, we, our small donor folks, are being outspent by 2/3. If you compare on the left-hand side small donors in 2012 to the super PACs, same amount of money, right? That's 23 super PACs or millionaires versus millions of folks. I'm going to go through these pretty quick, but here's good old Barry in 1960 identifying the problem. This is not just yesterday's problem. This has been going on for a considerable period of time. Senator McCain, I suppose he's a little angry because of what they did to McCain-Feingold. I don't blame him. But he's saying that scandals are on the way, and I tend to believe Senator McCain when he says that. Lindsey Graham, adding a little Southern flair, y'all, saying that we need a constitutional amendment to fix this problem. And finally, Senator Kerry, I guess not finally, one more. Remember this guy? He spent 3 years in prison, was sentenced to 6, but spent 3 years in prison for doing what folks can do legally today because of Citizens United. That should tell you something right there. There was a survey by the New York Times of the American public to ask about the money's influence on politics. 85% of Americans think there's too much. There's about 15% there that say it's either too little or about right. I don't know who put this in there, maybe George, but I think this is pretty good. About the same amount are pretty sure they saw a UFO. So what corporations are using their rights to do? So corporations now have the right to the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, and the 14th Amendment, right? I haven't seen them try to use the Second Amendment yet, but I hope we don't end up there. These are the things that these corporations can do with their newfound personhood and their deep pockets. Refuse to disclose what's in their products. Didn't we just go through this with GMOs a couple of weeks ago? You don't have to put what's on the labels anymore in our food. Corporations got that one. I'm not going to mention any names here of any corporations, by the way. I know you're all smart enough to know who I'm talking about. Avoid government inspections. Put chain stores into communities that don't want them. Yeah, try to stop, that big box store that wants to move into your community. They've got some awful deep pockets. You're going to have a very difficult time stopping them if that's what they want to do. Avoid subpoenas, subvert local government laws. If you want to put a mega hog farm in a community in Wisconsin, they don't even have a say in stopping you, right? To have a safety survey done. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but that's my understanding. And there's one I'll mention because I think I'm doing okay on time, Kathy. This is one that really got me up the other day. So our legislature, how many people in here have ever owned a Switchblade? Anybody? Nope. I wanted one really bad when I was 12 years old. My mother told me no. And it's probably good she told me no because they're not real safe, right? Spring-loaded knife. Well, our legislature found its way to approve them very recently. So you can own a Switchblade if you want. I've decided I'd probably pass that by now. So I couldn't figure out for the life of me why our elected officials would spend time on Switchblades. Didn't make any sense to me, and I had an idea of how that might have happened. So I did a quick Google search on Switchblade and the acronym ALEC, American Legislative Executive Council. Right? This is a group of lobbyists for lobbyists by lobbyists that will help you get your bills passed, right? Through Congress. They line up a legislator with somebody that's going to pay them that money to get that legislation forward. What I got back was quite interesting. Indiana's already passed this recently. Oklahoma, I think Hawaii, Wisconsin, and there are several more. Makes no sense to me, but that's what money in politics is doing for us. So our strategy is a very local strategy. We need to start local before we can go to the state and federal governments. Truly grassroots, and that's us here in this room today. Citizens lobbying their elected officials and pushing Congress, our legislatures, and ultimately Congress, to change the Constitution that say that corporations are not people, money's not free speech, and it's okay to regulate that speech. So United to Amend Partners, we can include Monona as part of that. What can we do here locally? We can pass a resolution that says that, and I'll show you the language in a minute, build coalitions with other organizations, hold events to educate like we're doing here now, enlist citizens to come and help us with this movement, to reclaim our democracy, obviously. And here's the ballot language. This language was also, very similar language, was introduced to the Assembly and the Senate in 2003. Unfortunately, it died in committee. Didn't get any further than that. And since then, communities in Wisconsin have been passing this. It's non-binding, but we've been passing it at a very good clip. So here's a list of the cities, towns, counties, and municipalities. And I cut and paste over there to the right from the April ballot. And I also included the percentage by which these measures passed. Overwhelming, because I know there's not 84% Democrats or Republicans in Janesville, right? So that's a good mix of everybody. Here are the states. There are 17 so far. We need to get Wisconsin on that list. It takes 2/3 of the states in order to call for a constitutional convention, and it'll take 2/3 of the states in order to ratify that. So we've got a lot of work to do. So what can we do? So talk to your neighbors, right? Spread the word on social media. Write a letter to your local editor. Obviously help Monona get this resolution passed. Maybe after we're done here, we'll spread it to Cottage Grove, right? All our kids go to the same school, so why not? contribute money, either to Wisconsin United to Amend, and I also think we're taking up a little kitty here. Thank you, Senator Miller. I believe Wally donated some money as well. So we're headed in the right direction. Also, if you like rock and roll and you drink a beer every now and then, we're having an annual fundraiser. You don't even have to have a beer, but I'll buy you one if you show up. So September 11th at the high noon, there'll be a silent auction as well. We'll have an MC from a local radio show and 3 great bands. So if you can make it, please come. So thank you. Let's take the corporations out, put the people back in. I appreciate your time.